Welcome to Sinister States.
I used to think that childhood was a place you could leave behind, like a room you outgrow or a house you move away from. I believed that the things you saw and felt as a kid, those wild, impossible things, would fade with time, replaced by the steady, gray logic of adulthood. I was wrong. Some things wait for you. Some things remember. I was 8 years old the first time I met him. My parents had just moved us to a new town, a place with wide, empty streets and houses that all looked the same. My father called it a fresh start, but I could tell by the way my mother's hands shook when she unpacked the boxes that it was something else. I didn't ask questions. I just watched and listened and tried to be invisible. The house was old, older than any we'd lived in before. It creaked and groaned at night, as if it were settling into its own skin. My room was at the end of a long hallway, with a window that looked out over the backyard. There was a swing set out there, rusted and half swallowed by tall grass. I remember thinking it looked lonely, like it was waiting for someone to come back. The first few nights, I couldn't sleep. The house made noises I didn't recognize, and the shadows seemed to move when I wasn't looking. My parents were always tired, always arguing in low voices behind closed doors. I spent most of my time alone, drawing pictures or reading the same books over and over. That's when he appeared. I was sitting on the floor, coloring in a picture of a dragon, when I heard a voice behind me. Red is a good color for fire. It said that I turned around, but there was no one there. Just the empty room, the pale light from the window, and the sound of my own breathing. I went back to coloring, but the voice came again, softer this time. "Do you want to see something cool?" I looked up, and there he was. A boy, maybe a little older than me, with dark hair and eyes that seemed too big for his face. He was wearing old-fashioned clothes, a button-up shirt, suspenders, and pants that were too short at the ankles. He smiled, and I felt a strange warmth in my chest, like I'd just remembered something important. "Who are you?" I asked. He tilted his head, as if the question surprised him. "I'm your friend," he said. "Don't you remember?" I didn't, but I wanted to. There was something about him that felt familiar, like a song I'd heard a long time ago. I nodded, and he grinned. "Come on," he said, holding out his hand. "Let's play." We played for hours. He showed me how to make paper airplanes that really flew, how to build a fort out of blankets and chairs, how to draw monsters that looked like they might crawl off the page. He told me stories about the house, about secret rooms and hidden doors, about treasures buried in the backyard. When my mother called me for dinner, he disappeared. I looked for him, but he was gone, as if he'd never been there at all. That night, I asked my parents if they'd seen another boy in the house. My father laughed, but my mother just looked at me, her eyes dark and tired. "There's no one here but us," she said. But I knew better. That he came back the next day, and the day after that. We played and talked and laughed, and for the first time since we'd moved, I felt like I belonged somewhere. He told me his name was Eli, and that he'd lived in the house a long time ago. He said he didn't have any family, not anymore, but that was okay because now he had me. I didn't question it. Kids don't, not really. When you're young, the world is full of things that don't make sense, and you just accept them. Monsters under the bed, voices in the walls, friends who appear out of nowhere. It's only later, when you grow up and start to forget, that you realize how strange it all was. Eli became my secret. I didn't tell anyone about him, not even when my parents started to worry about how much time I spent alone. They thought I was lonely, that I needed to make friends at school. But I had Eli, and that was enough. He was always there when I needed him. When the other kids teased me for being quiet, Eli would whisper jokes in my ear until I laughed. When my parents fought, he'd take me outside and show me how to catch fireflies in the dark. When I was scared, he'd hold my hand and promise that nothing could hurt me as long as he was around. But there were things about Eli that didn't make sense. Sometimes he'd say things that sounded old, like he was remembering a different time. He'd talk about people I'd never met, places I'd never been. Once, he showed me a scar on his arm and said it was from the accident, but when I asked what happened, he just smiled and changed the subject. And sometimes, when the light was just right, I could see through him. Just a little. Like he was made of smoke, or mist, or something that wasn't quite real that I didn't care. He was my friend, and that was all that mattered. But then, one night, everything changed. It was late, and I was lying in bed, listening to the house settle around me. I heard footsteps in the hallway, soft and slow. I thought it was my mother coming to check on me, but when the door opened, it was Eli. He looked different. Pale, almost translucent, with shadows under his eyes. He sat on the edge of my bed and stared at me, his expression serious. "I have to go," he said. That I sat up, my heart pounding. "Why?" He looked away, his hands twisting in his lap. "Sometimes, friends have to leave," he said. "But I'll come back. I promise." I wanted to ask him why, to beg him to stay, but before I could, he was gone. The room felt colder, emptier, as if he'd taken all the warmth with him. That I didn't see Eli after that. Not for a long time. That I tried to forget. I made new friends at school, learned to ride my bike, started playing soccer. My parents stopped fighting as much, and the house felt less strange. I grew up, little by little, and the memories of Eli faded, becoming just another story I told myself when I couldn't sleep. But some nights, when the wind rattled the windows and the shadows crept across the walls, I'd remember him. I'd remember the way he smiled, the sound of his voice, the feeling of his hand in mine. And I'd wonder if he was still out there, waiting for me. Years passed. I left home, went to college, got a job in the city. I told myself I was happy, that I'd moved on. But there was always a part of me that felt unfinished, like I'd left something important behind. That it wasn't until I turned 30 that Eli came back. It started with dreams. Vivid, unsettling dreams that left me gasping for air in the middle of the night. In the dreams, I was a child again, running through the old house, calling Eli's name. Sometimes he'd answer, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of him, just out of reach, his eyes wide and pleading. I tried to ignore the dreams, to write them off as stress or nostalgia. But they kept coming, night after night, growing more intense. I started waking up with bruises on my arms, scratches on my legs. I told myself I was sleepwalking, that it was nothing to worry about. But then, things started happening during the day. It was little things at first. I'd find objects in my apartment moved or missing. My keys would turn up in the freezer, my phone in the bathroom sink. I'd hear footsteps in the hallway when I was alone, whispers in the dark when I tried to sleep. One morning, I woke up to find a drawing on my kitchen table. It was a picture of a dragon, colored in red crayon. My hands shook as I picked it up, memories flooding back. I hadn't drawn a dragon since I was 8 years old. That's when I knew. Eli was back. At first, I was terrified. I thought I was losing my mind, that the stress of work and life had finally caught up with me. I started seeing a therapist, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. How could I explain that my childhood imaginary friend had come back, and that he wasn't imaginary anymore? But the signs kept coming. More drawings, more whispers, more dreams. I started to feel his presence, a cold weight in the air, a shadow at the edge of my vision. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of him in the mirror, standing behind me, his eyes dark and sad. I tried to ignore him, to push him away, but he wouldn't leave. He was always there, waiting, watching. One night, I woke up to find him sitting at the foot of my bed. He looked older now, his features sharper, his eyes deeper. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Hello, old friend," he said. That I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "I missed you," he said. "Did you miss me?" I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. I was frozen, Trapped in my own body, he leaned closer, his face inches from mine. "We have so much to catch up on," he whispered. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the dark, shaking and sweating. After that, things got worse. The dreams became nightmares, filled with blood and shadows and the sound of Eli's laughter. I started seeing him everywhere, in the subway, in the office, in the faces of strangers on the street. He was always watching, always waiting. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that I was just tired, just stressed. But deep down, I knew the truth. Eli was back. And this time, he wasn't going to leave. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I started to lose track of time, of days, of myself. My friends noticed, of course. They asked if I was okay, if I needed help. I lied to them, told them I was just busy, just tired. But the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid of what was happening to me. Afraid of what Eli wanted. I started to see patterns in the chaos. The drawings would appear on days when I felt most alone. The whispers grew louder when I tried to reach out to someone, to break the isolation that had settled over my life like a thick, suffocating blanket. It was as if Eli was trying to keep me to himself, to pull me back into the world we'd shared as children. I tried to fight it. I threw away the drawings, ignored the whispers, forced myself to go out, to be around people. But it didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. The more I resisted, the stronger Eli became. One night, I came home to find my apartment in disarray. Furniture overturned, books scattered across the floor, the walls covered in childish scrawls. Dragons, monsters, and a single word repeated over and over, "Remember." I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I wanted to run, to call someone, anyone, but I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear and a strange, overwhelming sense of déjà vu. That's when I heard his voice, clear and close, as if he were standing right beside me. "You forgot me," he said. "You promised you wouldn't, but you did." I turned, but there was no one there. Just the empty room, the chaos, and the echo of his words. I spent the night cleaning, scrubbing the walls until my hands were raw and bleeding. I tried to erase every trace of him, but it was impossible. The drawings kept coming back, no matter how many times I threw them away. I started to wonder if I was going insane. I made an appointment with a psychiatrist, desperate for answers, for help. But when I sat in her office, surrounded by diplomas and the soft hum of a white noise machine, I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. I talked about stress, about insomnia, about feeling disconnected from the world. She nodded, prescribed me some pills, and told me to get more rest. The pills didn't help. If anything, they made the dreams worse. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my sheets tangled around me like restraints. Sometimes, I'd find myself standing in the hallway, staring at the front door, my hand on the knob as if I were about to leave. But I never remembered getting out of bed. I started to keep a journal, hoping that writing things down would help me make sense of what was happening. I filled page after page with memories of Eli, of our games, our secrets, the way he'd made me feel safe when the world was too big and too loud. I wrote about the night he left, about the emptiness that followed, about the way I tried to fill that void with other people, other things. But no matter how much I wrote, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, that there was a piece of the story I'd forgotten, something important that Eli wanted me to remember. One night, as I was writing, I heard a knock at the door. It was late, too late for visitors. I hesitated, my pen frozen above the page. The knock came again, louder this time, more insistent. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and made my way to the door. I pressed my eye to the peephole, but the hallway was empty. I opened the door, just a crack, and peered out. Nothing, just the dim light of the hallway, the hum of the elevator at the end of the corridor. I was about to close the door when I saw it, a small, folded piece of paper on the doormat. I picked it up, my hands trembling, and unfolded it was a drawing. A picture of two boys, holding hands, standing in front of a house. My house. Our house. On the back, in shaky, childish handwriting, were 3 words: "Let me in." I dropped the paper as if it had burned me. My heart was racing, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and pressed my back against it, as if that could keep Eli out, but I knew it was too late. He was already inside. The next few days passed in a blur. I stopped going to work, stopped answering my phone. I barely left my apartment, afraid of what I might find if I did. The dreams grew more vivid, more real. I'd wake up with Eli's voice in my ear, his breath hot against my skin. He started to appear during the day, too. I'd catch glimpses of him in the corner of my eye, reflections in windows and mirrors. Sometimes, I'd hear him laughing, a high, sharp sound that made my skin crawl. I tried to fight back. I burned the drawings, tore up the journal, smashed every mirror in the apartment. But it didn't matter. Eli was always there, always waiting. One night, I woke up to find him standing at the foot of my bed. He looked different now. Older, taller, his eyes darker than I remembered. He smiled, but there was no kindness in it. "Why did you leave me?" he asked. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my voice caught in my chest. "You promised you'd never forget," he said. "But you did. You left me alone." Tears filled my eyes. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean to. I was just a kid. I didn't know." He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. I could see the anger in his eyes, the hurt. "You forgot me," he said again, his voice cold and flat. "And now you have to remember." He reached out, his hand cold and heavy on my shoulder. I tried to pull away, but I couldn't move. I was trapped, frozen. That he leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. "Let me in," he whispered. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor, my head pounding, my body aching. The apartment was dark, silent. I sat up, my heart racing, and looked around. Eli was gone, but I could feel him, inside me, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I tried to go back to my old life, to pretend that nothing had happened, but it was impossible. Eli was always there, in the back of my mind, whispering, watching. I started to lose time. Hours, sometimes days, would disappear, leaving me with no memory of what I'd done. I'd find strange messages on my phone, emails I didn't remember sending, receipts for things I didn't remember buying. My friends grew more concerned. They said I was acting strange, distant. They begged me to get help, to talk to someone. But I couldn't. I was afraid of what I might say, of what Eli might do. One night, I woke up in a park, miles from my apartment. I was barefoot, my clothes torn and dirty. My hands were covered in dirt, my nails broken and bleeding. I had no idea how I'd gotten there. I stumbled home, my mind racing, my body shaking. When I got to my apartment, I found a note taped to the door. "Thank you for playing with me," it said. "I missed you." I tore the note down, crumpled it in my fist. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but I knew there was nowhere to go. Eli was part of me now, and he wasn't going to let go. I started to research, desperate for answers. I read everything I could find about imaginary friends, about childhood trauma, about possession and hauntings. Most of it was nonsense, but some of it made sense. Some of it felt true. I found stories about people who'd lost time, who'd been haunted by memories they couldn't explain. Stories about imaginary friends who'd come back, who'd taken over their lives. Most of the stories ended badly. I tried to find a pattern, a way to break the connection. But the more I searched, the more hopeless it seemed. Eli was always one step ahead, always watching. One night, I found myself standing in front of my childhood home. I didn't remember getting there, didn't remember the drive. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling, The yard overgrown. I stood there for a long time, staring at the windows, the front door. I felt a pull, a deep, aching need to go inside. I walked up the steps, my heart pounding, and knocked on the door. There was no answer. I tried the handle, and to my surprise, it turned. The house was empty, silent. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, the air thick with the smell of old wood and memories. I wandered through the rooms, each one more familiar than the last. My old bedroom was just as I remembered it, small, with a window that looked out over the backyard. The swing set was still there, rusted and broken. I sat on the bed, my hands shaking, and closed my eyes. That's when I heard him. "Welcome home," Eli said. That I opened my eyes, and he was there, standing in the doorway. He looked just as he had when we were kids, small, pale, his eyes too big for his face. "I missed you," he said. That I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. He smiled, a sad, crooked smile. "Because you left me," he said. "Because you forgot." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean to." He stepped closer, his eyes shining with something I couldn't name. "I know," he said, "but it's too late." He reached out, his hand cold and heavy on my shoulder. "Let me in," he whispered. I felt a rush of memories, a flood of images and feelings. The games we'd played, the secrets we'd shared, the promises we'd made. I remembered the night he left, the way I'd cried myself to sleep, the emptiness that followed. I remembered something else, too, something I'd buried deep, too painful to face, the accident. It was late, and my parents were fighting again. I'd run outside, desperate to escape the shouting, the anger. I'd climbed onto the swing set, pushing myself higher and higher, trying to fly away. Eli was there, standing in the shadows, watching. "Come play with me," he'd said. I'd jumped from the swing, trying to reach him, but I'd fallen, hard, my head hitting the ground. Everything went black. When I woke up, Eli was gone, and I was alone. I looked at him now, standing in the doorway, and I understood. "You're not real," I said. "You're just a memory. A part of me I tried to forget." He smiled, but there was no joy in it. "I'm as real as you want me to be," he said. "As real as you need me to be." He stepped closer, his eyes dark and endless. "Let me in," he whispered. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the flood of memories, the pain, the loss. But when I opened them, Eli was gone. I was alone, sitting on the bed, the sun setting outside the window. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and made my way out of the house. I locked the door behind me, the key cold and heavy in my hand. As I walked away, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But I knew Eli wasn't gone. Not really. He was still there, in the back of my mind, waiting. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That I left my childhood home and never looked back. That Eli faded away like a bad dream. That I finally found peace. But life isn't that simple, and neither are the things we carry with us. Some ghosts don't haunt houses, they haunt people. The days that followed were strange, suspended between relief and dread. I went back to my apartment in the city, half expecting to find it trashed again, but everything was in its place. The air felt different, though heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I tried to settle back into my routine, but nothing felt normal. I'd catch myself glancing over my shoulder, pausing at mirrors, listening for footsteps that never came. I told myself Eli was gone, that I'd faced him and won, but deep down, I knew better. The dreams didn't stop. If anything, they grew more vivid, more insistent. I'd find myself back in that old house, wandering the halls, calling Eli's name. Sometimes he'd answer, his voice echoing from somewhere just out of sight. Sometimes I'd see him, standing at the end of a long hallway, his eyes wide and pleading. I'd wake up with my heart racing, my sheets tangled around me. the taste of fear sharp on my tongue. I started to notice other things, too. Little things. At first, a toy car on my desk that I hadn't seen in years, a marble rolling across the floor, a crayon drawing tucked into a book. Each time, I'd feel a jolt of recognition, a memory surfacing from the depths. I tried to ignore them, to tell myself it was just stress, just my mind playing tricks on me. But the signs kept coming, and with them, a growing sense of unease. One evening, as I was leaving work, I saw a boy standing across the street. He was watching me, his face half hidden in shadow. For a moment, I thought it was Eli, but when I blinked, he was gone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty sidewalk, my heart pounding in my chest. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. I called my therapist, made another appointment. This time, I tried to be honest. I told her about the dreams, the memories, the feeling that something was following me. She listened, her expression calm and patient, and asked if I'd ever experienced anything like this before. That I hesitated, then told her about Eli, about the games we'd played, the secrets we'd shared, the way he'd disappeared and come back. I expected her to look at me like I was crazy, but she just nodded, scribbling notes on her pad. Sometimes, she said, the mind creates what it needs to survive. Imaginary friends can be a way for children to cope with loneliness, trauma, or fear. But when those feelings aren't resolved, they can resurface later in life, especially during times of stress. I wanted to believe her, to accept that Eli was just a manifestation of my own pain, a ghost conjured by memory and regret. But it didn't feel that simple. Eli felt real, too real. That night, I dreamed of the swing set again. I was a child, flying through the air, the wind in my hair, the world spinning below me. Eli was there, standing in the grass, his arms outstretched. "Jump," he called. "I'll catch you." I hesitated, fear knotting in my stomach. But his eyes were kind, his smile reassuring. I let go, soaring through the air, trusting him to keep his promise. But when I landed, he was gone. I hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of me. I looked up, searching for him, but all I saw was the empty yard, the swing set creaking in the wind. I woke up with tears on my face, my body aching as if I'd fallen for real. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. The next day, I got a call from my mother. She sounded tired, her voice thin and strained. "I found something while cleaning out the attic," she said. "It's a box of your old things. Do you want it?" I hesitated, then agreed. Maybe, I thought, it would help me make sense of what was happening. Maybe it would help me remember. A few days later, the box arrived. I carried it into my apartment, set it on the table, and stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside were the artifacts of a childhood half forgotten: action figures, books, a faded baseball glove, a stack of drawings. I sifted through them, each one sparking a memory, a flash of the past. At the bottom of the box, I found a small, battered notebook. My name was written on the cover in shaky, childish handwriting. I opened it, flipping through the pages. Most were filled with stories and drawings, dragons, monsters, secret codes. But near the end, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a list of rules. 1. Don't tell anyone about Eli. 2. Don't let Eli get mad. 3. Don't play in the basement after dark. 4. If Eli says to hide, hide. 5. If Eli says to run, run. 6. If Eli says to let him in, say no. I stared at the list, my hands trembling. I didn't remember writing it, but the handwriting was mine. I read the last rule over and over, the words blurring on the page. If Eli says to let him in, say no. A chill ran down my spine. I closed the notebook, my mind racing. Had I let him in? Was that why he was back? I tried to remember, to piece together the fragments of memory, but it was like trying to hold water in my hands. The more I tried, the more it slipped away. That night, I dreamed of the basement. I was standing at the top of the stairs, the door open, darkness yawning below. Eli was at the bottom, his face hidden in shadow. "Come down," he called. "I want to show you something." I hesitated, fear prickling at the back of my neck. But his voice was gentle, coaxing. "It's safe," he said. "I promise." I took a step, then another, the stairs creaking beneath my feet. The darkness pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. I reached the bottom, my heart pounding. Eli was waiting, his eyes shining in the dark. "Do you remember?" he asked. That I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. That he reached out, his hand cold and heavy on my shoulder. "Let me in," he whispered. That I woke up gasping, my body drenched in sweat. The room was dark, silent. I lay there, listening to the sound of my own breathing, the echo of Eli's voice in my ears. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I called my mother. "Do you remember anything strange about the old house?" I asked. "Anything about the basement?" There was a long pause. "Why are you asking?" she said, her voice wary. I've been having dreams. About Eli." Another pause, longer this time. "I always thought you'd made him up," she said. "But sometimes, I'd hear you talking to someone down there. I'd come to check, but you'd be alone. You always said Eli was with you." I swallowed, my mouth dry. "Did anything ever happen?" "Anything bad?" She hesitated. "There was one night," she said. "You were maybe 8 or 9. I heard you screaming. I ran downstairs and found you in the corner, shaking. You wouldn't talk, wouldn't look at me. You just kept saying, 'Don't let him in. Don't let him in.'" I closed my eyes, the memory surfacing like a bruise. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have done more. I just thought it was a nightmare." "It's okay," I said, though it wasn't. "Thanks, Mom." After we hung up, I sat in silence, the weight of the past pressing down on me. I realized I'd spent my whole life running from that night, from the fear and confusion I'd felt. I'd buried it deep, hoping it would stay hidden. But Eli had never left. He'd just been waiting. I knew I couldn't run anymore. I had to face him, to face myself. That night, I sat in the dark, the notebook in my lap. I read the list of rules again, tracing the words with my finger. If Eli says to let him in, say no. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and waited. The room grew colder, the shadows deepening. I felt a presence, a weight in the air. "Hello, old friend," Eli said. That I opened my eyes. He was standing in the corner, his eyes dark and endless. "Why did you come back?" I asked. He smiled, a sad, crooked smile. "You called me," he said. "You needed me." "I don't need you anymore," I said, my voice shaking. He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "Everyone needs someone," he whispered. "Even you." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "I'm not a kid anymore," I said. "I can't keep hiding from the past. I can't keep letting you in." He reached out, his hand cold and heavy on my shoulder. "Let me in," he whispered. I closed my eyes, the words from the notebook echoing in my mind. "No," I said, my voice steady. "Not this time." There was a moment of silence, the air thick with tension. Then, slowly, Eli stepped back, his eyes wide with surprise. "You remember," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, my heart pounding. "I remember," I said. "I remember everything." He smiled, a real smile this time, full of sadness and relief. "Thank you," he said, and then he was gone. The room felt lighter, the air warmer. I sat there for a long time, the notebook in my lap, the weight of the past finally lifting. That I wish I could say that was the end, that I never saw Eli again. But sometimes, late at night, I'll catch a glimpse of him in the corner of my eye, or hear his laughter in the wind. He's a part of me, a shadow I'll always carry. But I'm not afraid anymore. I've learned that some ghosts aren't meant to be exorcised. Some are meant to be understood, accepted, even loved. They're the parts of ourselves we try to forget, the memories we bury, the pain we hide. But they don't go away. They wait for us, patient and persistent, until we're ready to face them. Eli was my friend, my protector, my shadow. He was the part of me that survived, that held on when everything else fell apart. And now, finally, I can let him rest. I still keep the notebook tucked away in a drawer. Sometimes, when the world feels too big, too loud, I'll take it out and read the list of rules. I'll remember the games we played, the secrets we shared, the promises we made. And I'll remember that I'm not alone, not really. Because we all have our ghosts. We all have our Eli. And sometimes, the only way to move forward is to let them in, just long enough to say goodbye.